All right, well, welcome. And thank you for joining us today. We're thrilled to have over 100 people registered for today's webinar. My name is Eric Anderson, and I will be your co-host today, along with Christy. By the way, feel free to ask a question during the session, and you can do that at the bottom of your screen. At the end of the presentation, we'll get to as many as we can. Before I turn it over, I'd like to give you a little background about our presenter. Dr. Christy Anderson is the Research and Programs Officer at Fourth Purpose. Dr. Anderson has extensive background in corrections, having worked for Burl Cain at the Louisiana State Penitentiary at Angola, and as an assistant warden at the Louisiana Correctional Institute for Women. She's also developed educational programs in the corrections setting, working with 18 state departments in her role as Chief Operating Officer at the Prison Seminaries Foundation. Christy is the author of 3 books and numerous articles concerning prison reform and inmate rehabilitation. Dr. Anderson earned her PhD in theology. She has multiple graduate degrees and is a board-certified psychiatric mental health nurse. And she is also a newly minted grandmother to a 3-week-old little girl named Elena May. And with that, I will turn it over to Christy.
Well, thank you. I also happen to be Eric's wife, so he has to say all those nice things about me. Thank you all for joining us today. Let me see if I can get my screen up here, taking away Eric's control there. You're signed up for this webinar for us to talk about our micro lessons from Fourth Purpose. Our foundation creates resources that are staff facing. We also create resources that are inmate facing and community facing. And why would we invest our time into creating resources to elevate U.S. correctional workforce, to increase the competencies and professionalism and public image of the correctional workforce? Well, it's because our mission statement is to make prison a place of transformation. We want to see better outcomes in our prison system, both for the staff and for those in custody. And so when Josh hired me to work at Fourth Purpose, he wanted me to research best practices from across the globe and to see what was working best in corrections, to see what we would invest in and leverage to improve U.S. corrections. So as a researcher, I quantify kind of what makes up what I call a hope-based, goodwill-oriented facility, our correctional department. What are the common factors that we see in departments or facilities that kind of have this very positive impact on both their staff and those in custody as well. And then so looking at the commonalities there, but then also comparing that to institutions or departments that are more fear-based, that are more oriented towards punitive mindset with a negative workplace environment, and kind of what are the commonalities that tend to lead to those types of facilities and departments. And looking at this, I study these differences and kind of commonalities, not only from a research standpoint, but also I bring to it my own lived experience, as you heard in my bio that Eric shared. I know what it's like to work in a hope-based prison facility, where as staff members, we actually shared a common goal and were excited to be part of the changes and the things that were happening in our facility, that people in general were happy to be there as the staff, and even the inmates were seeing changes among those in our custody. I mean, at that facility, there's been documentaries written about that facility. There's been books written about that facility. It was an exciting place to work. That doesn't mean that it was easy. Prison work comes with a lot of challenges. So it wasn't necessarily easy. And we certainly didn't slack on security, but it was an exciting hope-based environment to work in. And conversely, I've also worked in fear-based facilities. I know what it's like to for a facility to kind of be ran from the intimidation factor, to get compliance from inmates using fear and intimidation, and get compliance in from the staff using intimidation. And that kind of environment will suck the life out of you. It's very, very difficult and challenging to work in. So I've seen the difference that a good leader can make. And I have seen success stories in the US, as you have too. But overall, I would say we are struggling from what I call a normalization of hardness in US corrections. We tend to think, I mean, this job will change you for the negative, and there's a lot that we've just decided this is just what it takes to work in this environment. Not everybody's cut out for it. This is just the way it is. And that normalization of hardness is not serving us well. It's perpetuating a poor image of our workforce. It's reinforcing negative workplace cultures, and it's feeding into our chronic staffing problems that so many of us are facing. That's my perspective. I want to hear from you. We're going to do a couple of polls here with you. I want to hear what you have to say about kind of the overall characteristic of workplace culture in corrections. There should be a poll up. Let me see. Go ahead and weigh in there. Give that an answer, and then we'll let Eric give us those results here in just a minute. Is it a place where people are excited to be part of the team? They should have a shared vision. Or do we tend to suffer more from a negative workplace environment where we're seeing difficulty retaining the staff that we do hire?
So it looks like about 75% of you have responded, and it's 85%, about 85% are saying it's negative, that overall they would characterize the workplace culture as negative.
And we know that just the chronic staffing problems that we're having is causing us, it's bringing people to the table for us to start talking about our workplace culture, and our difficulty in hiring and retaining this younger generation of workforce potentials is also causing us to look at our workplace culture more. So I believe that the time is right for a change. It's easy to say, well, this is just corrections. This is how it's always been. It's never going to change. But we have models that show us a way that we can do prison differently. We have foreign models that are bright light, that we can see that they suffered from the same kinds of things we're suffering from in US corrections today, and they were able to overcome those challenges and sustain reform. But we don't even have to look outside of our own country. Our own corrections professionals and researchers here in the US have defined what we need to do in order to change our workplace culture and turn the tide from this kind of chronic negative punitive mindset into more of a positive, purpose-driven, hope-based workplace. So we have our own research findings that tell us what we need to do. And interestingly enough, those kinds of findings overlap perfectly to what we see that have worked in these foreign models. And we do have success stories in the US. We do have prisons that are bright spots of positive reform. Another thing that we have going for us is that really when you talk to state leaders, overall, they also are pushing toward change. The overall attitude is that we want to move more into this restorative focus, this more emphasis of the human services side of corrections, emphasis on the human dignity piece. We know that we can't keep doing things like we've always done them. So even our top leaders across the country, we have a commonality in what they are saying. Also, I would say that the tide is turning even in social awareness, that we're seeing more emphasis from the public to want to see corrections change from a fear-based or punitive mindset to more of a hope-based human dignity type focus. So I think the time for change is right. I think, like I said, the difficulties in staffing shortages and retention is causing people to say, hey, we need some new ideas. We need to try something new. And just a couple of weeks ago, we were in New Orleans for the ACA conference, and for the CLA conference, we spent some time. I presented the wellness plan at the CLA conference, and several of the state leaders came up to us and said, you know, we have some great initiatives in our state. We're doing some really cool things. We're trying to push some cool changes in our state, but we need help with our culture. We can't seem to get this down and get our culture changed so that these new ideas take root. And I thought it was interesting to have those conversations in light of this webinar that we're having today. So we're hearing kind of this call from the leaders saying we need a change, but the difficulty of getting it down to the culture level. Let me ask you, let's do one more poll. How do you change a workplace culture? Eric, if you could throw that up, if you guys can weigh in. In order to turn an organization in a new direction, how should that change be implemented? Should it be a top-down approach? Should it be a bottom-up, or should it be in both directions? Go ahead and weigh in there. Let's unpack that a little bit.
So about, let's see, 75, 80% of you have responded. Thank you for doing that. It looks like about 75% of everyone is saying both. You have to drive it both top down and bottom up in order to move in a new direction. So thanks for doing that.
Yeah, so some did answer top down. I figured anybody that's ever tried to initiate change and you didn't have top support, you probably realized like it's almost impossible. You're really kind of dead in the water if you don't have that top-down support. So I agree with those that said top-down. You really do have to have that top support to make any movement. So that is so important. But I do want to spend some time on the emphasis of that bottom-up momentum, because we can't neglect the power of grassroots movements and the influence that we really do have in our rank and our line staff level. Because if you only have top-down strategy, like Peter Drucker said, culture eats strategy for breakfast. You can have the best laid plans of how to change your culture. And if you don't have that kind of momentum, that those places to take root in the lower ranks, it's not going to be effective. Culture is a combination of what you create and what you allow. And what you allow, that's really going to get played out at those bottom levels. So all of this is what I was thinking about and wrestling with when I was thinking about how do we really make U.S. prisons a place of transformation when we're hearing really good ideas at the top level, but we're just not seeing it's the implementation part where everybody's really struggling. And so I was just searching, how do we as Fourth Purpose create tools to help this change happen? And I was thinking about Malcolm Gladwell's book, Tipping Point. If any of you read that, it's about 20 years old now. A very popular book, very interesting read, where he explains some of the major movements in our culture have really happened with small pieces of change. In other words, these levers that are placed in strategic areas that really created that tipping point. So sometimes it's not that huge saturation level that we think it's going to take. It's key changes in key places that create that tipping point. And then once you have the tipping point, it's easy then to move forward with your cultural change. So I was thinking about that. I reviewed his book again, and this statement really stood out to me. He said, if you want to bring a fundamental change to people's belief and behavior, you need to create a community around them where those new beliefs can be practiced and expressed and nurtured. And that's what I really wanted to camp out on. How do we create these places so that what's being pushed down from the top actually take root, and these new beliefs, they don't get swallowed up in a negative workplace culture, but they can take root because they're being nurtured. And that was kind of the impetus of creating these micro lessons. So what I'm trying to do and I'm working nationally, so all of you have your own state campaigns, but what I'm trying to do is create a common language and culture where your new ideas as leaders and as change agents can take root and be practiced. So the technical word here is environmental cues. So we have to infuse environmental cues in our workplace culture, in crucial places, in the hands of influencers, so that the new ideas that are being pushed down can take root. And this, I mean, think about how this happens even in our culture and society. We've seen changes in our society that hasn't necessarily been driven by some leader, but yet it took root kind of at that grassroots level. Think about, let me give a couple of examples. Think about, if you're my age, I'm 51. If you think about, if you're my age or older, and you think about TV shows that you watched growing up, if you went back to watch some of those TV shows, say from the 70s or 80s or 90s, you're going to hear them say things that you think, oh my goodness, we don't say that anymore. Or that's not okay to say anymore. So it's those cultural kind of tipping points that changed. What about bullying? I mean, when I grew up, there was bullying in school, and it was just part of school. I mean, teachers didn't like it, and they policed it when they could, but overall, it was just part of school. But nowadays, bullying, like even the kids are like, hey, it's not cool to bully. So that tipping point kind of, it happened. And then now you have these environmental cues that say, hey, that's not okay to do anymore. Another one that's happening right now that I'm actually very excited about is this idea of body shaming. Like, it's becoming no longer cool to insult people or say, have a snide, funny remark because they got a few extra pounds on them, which I'm excited about. Again, if you, from the 70s on, if you're a woman here, can I get a testimony from some of the women on the call? If you were not twig skinny, then you weren't attractive. You had to be this unrealistic thinness, that if you hang out with some college age girls these days, like, they're getting over that. They're kind of creating these environmental cues where they're saying, hey, it's not okay to get on this body shaming thing. Like, we're over that. We're done with that. We're going to be okay with our appearance and with our body image. And I think that's so healthy, and I'm so excited about it. But it's not like one particular person is driving that, but these crucial environmental cues are in our society now, where they're basically saying, hey, this is how we act now. This is what's okay to do and what to say now. And so how do we infuse those environmental cues in our culture to say, hey, this is how we're going to be now? And for me, my little catchphrase is, I want to make it cool to care in corrections. That yes, we're security minded. Yes, we run safe and secure facilities, but we also, it's cool for us to care. Like, we are professionals who are, it is a human services oriented job with a security specialty. And we're a place of purpose and meaning here because we're investing in people's lives. That's the kind of culture that we want to create, where it's cool to be that kind of person in corrections. And so what environmental cues do we have to infuse in our culture so that begins to take root, and that those behaviors and beliefs are able to be nurtured and expressed? So you have environmental cues in your facilities now. The question is, are they good or are they bad? Are they positive? Are they negative? So I wonder if we have some training professionals on this call. I know I have a few because Eric said their names earlier, but if you're responsible for creating that academy environment, and you take it very seriously to bring your new cadets or your new hires into this mentality of professionalism and competencies and valorization of this industry, and you're teaching them, you're giving them great tools in the academy, like emotional intelligence, the importance of de-escalation and lowering the tension, the ability to have respect and rapport, and yet still maintain professionalism and healthy boundaries. And so you're creating careful lessons and training in that academy so that you're creating a professional where it is cool to care in corrections. But then maybe as soon as they leave the academy and hit that facility, they're hit with negative environmental cues where basically they're saying, hey, that's great at the academy, but we don't do that around here. That's not who we are. That's not how we act. And then that culture just eats away your strategy of raising the professionalism of your new hires. So maybe, you know, are your environmental cues currently, are they positive? Are they negative? And we all struggle with those negative environmental cues, but how do we inundate our workforce with positive environmental cues till finally we create that tipping point where people are saying, oh, we don't say that anymore. We don't act like that anymore. And maybe the environmental cues, the positive environmental cues become so strong and prominent that maybe you're still a bad actor who's thinking a particular way, but you at least no longer say it anymore because you realize, hey, the culture has changed. I don't get to say that anymore. I hope that makes sense, but that's what these micro lessons for. They're creating these environmental cues to create that tipping point of, oh, this is who we are now. This is what's okay to say and what's how we behave now, so that those positive messages that are being pushed down by your leadership can take root and be nurtured and expressed. So in these micro lessons, it was important for me to create messaging that can fit what you're already doing. You guys already have probably strategies to change your workplace culture. Let me just share a couple of examples of ones I've heard recently. I will be with the North Carolina wardens next week. I wonder if maybe we have some people on this call from North Carolina, but they are in the middle of a campaign for 2022 called All In. And it's a 10-point aggressive plan to address their retention and recruitment problems so that they can get their staffing numbers up and get those vacancies filled. And they're looking at how to improve their workplace environment and staff engagement and training and all of that. So just a very specific campaign that North Carolina is in. I heard yesterday Ann Precythe in Missouri talk about a campaign of a kindness campaign that they're going to be entering in. Maybe I have some friends from Maine on this call that I've worked with. Their initiative is called the Maine Model of Corrections. So each state kind of has their strategy and what they're doing to change their workplace culture. I don't want to define that for you. You know your people better and your organization better, but I want to give you messages that fit into what you're already doing so that we can nationally have a healthier language in trying to change the culture in corrections. I wanted it to be suitable for facilities in all stages on the continuum. Maybe some facilities or departments are much more progressive in their reform efforts than others, but I wanted to give lessons and language and tools that fit wherever you are on that stage of reform continuum. And then also we're trying to create a national effort. I don't think it's helpful. I mean, it is helpful for us to have kind of one-off success stories, but we're not really going to change the image of corrections until we kind of have a national improvement in we're telling a better story and start changing that public image. And then that we'll start seeing the effects of improving recruitment and retention, improving recruitment across the country, across state lines. So what are these micro lessons? They are short, creative, and impactful avenues to reinforce the purpose, meaning, and professionalism behind who we are and what we do as correctional staff. It's a common, healthy language and valorization of the profession. So we're elevating this profession. Each asset has infographics and discussion questions. More assets will be added for each lesson in the coming months. Here's what's important for you to know. If you're looking for polished, finished lessons, hey, give me this training so that we can change our workplace culture, the end, that's not what this is. These are tools. They are not complete, fully baked trainings. We have that in other places that we're offering for staff, but that's not what the micro lessons are. The micro lessons are tools. So it's like if you wanted to build a house, I want to build a house here in the mountains of East Tennessee. Well, I want to pick what that house looks like and what fits the environment where I'm building it. So if you're on the West Coast on the beach, the house I have in mind may not fit your setting. You know the house you want to build. I don't want you to give me blueprints for my house. I want to do my own blueprints because I know the house I want. But I want good tools to build that house. So that's what this is. You have your blueprint. I'm not giving you the blueprint because you know what your department needs better than me for sure. But what I would like to do is give you tools so that you can carry out your mission. So that's what these micro lessons are. They are tools. So if you go on our website to the staff resources page, it's going to look like this. And if you toggle over to the micro lessons, you will see there's 6 of them right now. There are more coming. We will continue to crank these out probably at a rate of about 2 a year, 2 to 3 a year. So right now there's 6, but what I want this to be is a massive library of tools that facilities and departments can access to accomplish their mission of changing their own workplace culture, moving to that hope-based model. So in these micro lessons, you see these 6 here before you. We're going to unpack one of them. We only have time to really unpack one of them, but on your own time, you can peruse these. The prison of purpose has a prison is one that's designed to put ingrained in our workforce the dual role of corrections. It's easy for us to get lost in the day-to-day grind of corrections and just get sucked into the how and we forget the why. That yes, security is important. We are achieving public safety by keeping people off the street who aren't supposed to be there, but that's not all of public safety. We're also part of public safety is to return that person a better citizen who's less likely to reoffend. And keeping that dual role of prison before our workforce is so important. It cannot be overemphasized. So that's what the prison has a purpose micro lesson is about, reinforcing that dual nature of prisons. Valorization is an effort to address the public image of corrections. How do we improve that? We can't force the public to think about us differently, but when we understand who we are and we can tell a better story about who we are, we can start to change that public image. We also get into the issue of staff being compromised and how do we help them have the tools to draw from their values and beliefs so that they resist being compromised. That's all under valorization. The power of words is a precursor to more de-escalation training that will be coming. It is emphasizing the importance of our staff's role to not only squash violence and conflict, but also to model healthy interaction. The burnout is a feature of our wellness plan, but it's pulled out and can be used individually, talking about job burnout and the importance of tending to your workplace culture to help individual staff burnout. Heroes is a micro lesson that's public facing. So my mission there is if we could ever educate the public to really realize that people are actually coming back to their community from prison, that the story isn't over when they go to prison, then they will care about what's happening behind the bars, behind the walls of prison. So that one's public facing. And we think about the police as heroes, but really it's the correctional officers that are actually with the people for the long term and sending them back onto the streets. So that's where the real transformation happens and where it's so crucial. And then the value of volunteers, I'm not going to talk about today because I'm going to do a whole webinar just on that, the importance of our community partners and how to be good stewards of that. So we will talk about that later, but I'm going to just exit from the PowerPoint here and let's unpack this prison has a purpose one and just look at the assets that are within that. So let me get over to the web here. Okay, you should be seeing the website. And if you go on our website, you see our staff page here and you scroll down, you can toggle here. And if you toggle to our full courses, then you'll see our values-based wellness plan, which is a full training that we'll talk about in another webinar. We have another one coming up called Vision for Public Safety, but you want to toggle to the left here to get on micro lessons. And so let's talk about this Prison Has a Purpose one. You can watch the video from this site, which we're going to do in just a moment. But when you hit the download button, you're going to get a zip file of assets that go with this micro lesson. And what will be in this download, I won't do it now, but I've already done it. I'm going to show you what happens, but you're going to get a README file, which gives you suggestions on how to use this micro lesson. You're going to get an infographic. You're going to get discussion questions around this video. You're going to get the video file itself so that you will own that video. You won't have to stream it from the web. And there's going to be, this is coming for all of them, but we already have it for this one. There's another video file of expert commentary. And so let's look at what these assets look like for Prison Has a Purpose. So let me go to the downloads. So each one of these lessons comes with an infographic. So here's the one for Prison Has a Purpose, and you'll see up at the top, the point of this is to reinforce staff's valuable role in the big picture of public safety. And we are driving that dual purpose of prisons in this lesson. So we talk about public safety is not only preventing crime by locking the person away for a period of time, but also reducing delinquency and crime by helping them become people who are less likely to reoffend. That's going to take a dual mindset in our staff, that each one of us has our own specialty, security specialty, maybe treatment specialty. I came up through corrections in that treatment side of the house, but I still had to be security minded and take security training. So the point is that security people also have to be rehabilitative minded or treatment minded. We all have our specialty. We don't work outside of our scope of practice, but we have to work together and realize how each one of our roles impacts the other. We also talk a little bit about public perception, that it is changing, that the punitive mindset that sometimes we think the public wants, that is actually changing. And the truth is that there'll always be some in our prison population that will not want to change, and we have to still create restorative environments even as we're managing those recalcitrant, the recalcitrant segment of the population. And then down here we talk about what obstacles are we facing that's preventing the prison to truly live up to its potential, to its purpose. And we talk about the weakened workforce, the lack of support from the political arm that tends to make decisions that affect our wages and how prisons are ran. We talk about overcrowding and changes in mental health institutions that's led to an increased number of inmates with severe mental illness in our population. So those are some obstacles for us that keep us from achieving our purpose. And then some interventions, talking about investing in our staff and educating the public. So that's just kind of a snapshot of a lesson. A whole lesson can be developed around that, but that infographic is what the participant can take back with them. And then we provide some discussion questions in each one of these lessons. Now, look, these discussion questions are not end all be all. They are strictly just conversation starters. It's not rocket science. You can certainly add to this. You could make your own discussion questions. The point is to start dialogue around these topics. So those are two assets that sit in this micro lesson. And then let's watch the videos themselves that sit in here. Let me go back to the web. Okay, so and this video contains national statistics. Maybe your statistics in your individual state is better or worse, but all of these are try to be useful for any state.
Prison has a purpose. It was designed to keep unsafe people away from society for a time, provide the help they need, and return those people to society as safer citizens. But the weight of that transition rests heavy on the shoulders of correctional staff, who regularly are faced with direct and indirect exposure to violence, injury, and death. Persistent, difficult, and demanding social interactions that can lead to emotional exhaustion. Long hours, high turnover rates, and difficult recruitment, all leading to a workforce worn thin, with at least 1 out of 3 correctional officers showing signs of PTSD, and high rates of recidivism, where within 3 years of release, 2 out of 3 people are rearrested, and more than 50% are reincarcerated. So, how do we break the cycle? We start by investing in our most essential workers, by giving them the proper tools, principles, and practices that build resilience to combat burnout, helping them discover a sense of purpose in their position, leading to greater job satisfaction and fulfillment. Correctional staff are agents of transformation. They are vital to unlocking the purpose of prison, helping to rebuild safer environments for those incarcerated, leading to safer communities. Virtue manifests itself in action, and the courage to change starts with each of us. We're with you.
Okay, remember the purpose of this micro lesson. You're driving home that dual nature of prisons. Often in our recruitment materials and our billboards, how we try to attract potential workers to this field, it's overwhelmingly security driven. And when we emphasize security only, we're missing a whole potential employer or employee, a whole field of potential employees who are looking for a job with purpose and meaning, that want to know, hey, I'm impacting people's lives. And we have that to offer in spades. So our own workforce has to tell a better story about, yes, we're changing lives. We are agents of change. So this next video that I want to share with you, this is what I'm calling expert commentary or expert testimony from the field. I specifically went after well-known state leaders in corrections from red state areas. And the reason why I did that is because the red state areas, typically the public opinion and the policymakers tend to be more punitive in their mindset. I'm talking about the politicians that kind of oversee corrections. And so I feel like if we can make a change of the mindset in those kind of areas, the less, I guess, conservative leaning states, it'll be easier to make that change. Let me see if I can explain what I mean here. So this video, I think it's 3.5 minutes long. So let's go ahead and watch the whole thing. I think it'll be helpful.
In corrections, we play a role in public safety, a true role in delivering public safety, but it's often misunderstood. A lot of people, when they think about prison or corrections, they think public safety and they think about bars and people being confined. And that is public safety. You can't argue that that is public safety, but that's only one of the ways corrections has a significant role in public safety. The more significant and really the more difficult role we have in delivering public safety is by helping those that are incarcerated correct their behavior, take the programs and the other things that will help them make changes in their lives so that when they are released, because most inmates do ultimately get released into the community, when they can go into the community successfully and not return to prison. Incarceration is public safety. The punishment of a sentence is going to prison. It's not our job to inflict punishment past that. Our job at that point is to keep the individual in prison, but also offer the programming and the rehabilitative tools that can help that individual make changes in their lives if they choose to.
So I think it's twofold. I think we have sort of the security responsibility, the monitoring in the community, security in the prison, but I think our obligation is also to affect opportunities, to provide opportunities for people to take a different path at the end of their sentence.
The purpose of the adult correction system is to take broken people and make them whole. We're not punishers. The responsibility to punish is a function given to our judicial branch. We're responsible for carrying out the mandates of the court. And one of the mandates of the court is not just to hold someone for a finite period of time, but to give them tools to rehabilitate themselves during that sentence of incarceration. And that duty to rehabilitate is what modern day corrections is really about.
Well, the textbook answer is certainly, retribution, incapacitation, deterrence, rehabilitation, restoration, and all those components are important. But I think too often we in the profession, view ourselves as we take pride in protecting the public, but we view our role in that as doing so during the period of incapacitation, and that's important. I mean, we perform a very important function, keeping dangerous people from society. But I think too often we don't realize or take into account that over 90% of those are going to be released someday. So we have a tremendous responsibility to make a positive impact during the time they're with us, to not only reduce recidivism and ensure that the folks that get out of prison don't come back, but by doing that, we reduce future victimization. I remember when that transition in my thinking occurred, and I think that's just tremendously important that our officers understand that and view their public safety role as going beyond the time that we have individuals in our custody.
So I think the correctional system in this country has long been something that has been neglected and has not lived up to its true potential, but that's changing.
To me, the fundamental question is, what's the purpose of a prison? And to me, it's only two things. It's to protect, and it is to transform.
Back here. Okay, so again, all of those messages around driving the dual nature of what we do to achieve public safety, just keeping that, inundating those environmental cues with that kind of thinking, and what kind of difference would that make over time, where people or our workforce truly understands that dual nature of what they do. Okay, you should be seeing my PowerPoint again. So that's just an example of one of the modules, one of the micro lessons. That one was Prison Has a Purpose. You just saw all of the elements around that one micro lesson. So what do you do with that? Well, I want to encourage you to use your creativity and do it, use it however you want. Like, all of this is free for the taking, for you to use however you want. But let me give you some suggestions. So here are some options for usage, and this would be on that README text that comes in your download file as well. Any of this could be used as a training asset. So let's say, for instance, if you're a trainer and you already have an existing lesson that talks about the dual nature of public safety where corrections is concerned, maybe those expert testimonies would be an asset for you, or maybe the animation video would be an asset, or maybe you find these discussion questions helpful to stimulate some small group discussion around that. So maybe you have a training that you're already doing that this kind of stuff can feed into. I wish I had time. I would go over to the burnout one. Maybe you already do some wellness training, the burnout video or the burnout infographic would be easy to plug into what you're already doing. So, all of that can, if you want to pull out pieces and piecemeal your own thing, feel free. Use the videos alone, use the teaching assets alone. So that's one usage. If you see something here that hey, I like that, that's a positive message, I want to add that to what I'm already doing, feel free. The other thing is maybe you're responsible for creating in-service settings. Now, I worked in corrections. I never really saw the workforce get excited about the mandatory in-service hours that we had to do every year. Usually that was just kind of drudgery. What about, though, creating some really exciting in-service events around some of this material? I think each one of these topics could be, you just about have all you need to do each one of them to be a half-day focus for an in-service training. You could take the infographic, you could create a lesson around that. You could take the small group the discussion questions and create some small group interactions. You could create your own scenarios. That's something else I want to be adding to these eventually, is scenario examples. And you can use the videos. You could create a whole in-service around elevating U.S. corrections, increasing the valor of this profession, or increasing the professionalism with some of these. Another option would be, how do you create healthy dialogue among the staff? Perhaps using some of these assets in a staff meeting or in a roll call setting, where potentially you would show the video and have the discussion questions, or use the infographic and pass that out and discuss the information on there. Maybe use a video as a creative opening or closing into a training or meeting. I really believe we have to give our workforce language to tell a better story about what they're doing. If we ever want to change the public image of this field, our people have to tell a better story about what they do and why they do it. And so how do we stimulate conversations where we give them the language to help them understand what they're doing? I really think common sense will prevail most of the time. When you really allow people to think logically about the negative work environment that we work in and that we've normalized and that we have all been hurt from, and we talk about the fact that you have a handful of people that are really driving your turnover because they're so bitter and so burned out, they're toxic, and they're creating this negative work environment. I mean, people will start to understand, and they will start to say, hey, we really do have to change. I think if you give people an opportunity and let their common sense prevail, it'll go a long way. So how do we create opportunities for healthy dialogue where we're also providing common healthy language that they can grab a hold to? Other options for use is electronic delivery. I know a lot of you with COVID you're moving a lot of your training to digital delivery. So these are assets that are very conducive to digital delivery. If you have created an LMS system where you could upload videos and create threaded discussions where people can share their thoughts, and you can create a lesson around an infographic, you could even embed a test. So digital training options would be good. Also, email blast or videos and encouragement to support what you're already doing. For instance, I will just go back to what I heard about Missouri doing the kindness campaign. I don't know how, I didn't really read the details to find out how involved that campaign is going to be, but gosh, let me just share over here. If you look at, let's see, you should be seeing, if you look at the burnout infographic, it starts with that basic, what a lot of wellness programs use, and that's the SAMHSA wellness wheel. And then it talks about the stages of burnout. And if you look at there in that second stage of burnout, what we will all do when we're experiencing job burnout is we will begin to become emotionally detached and callous and irritable. And when we are that way, we're going to talk sharply to our coworkers. We're not going to have healthy interaction, interpersonal relationship skills with our coworkers. So that breeds that negative workplace environment because we're snapping at each other. And so my burnout is causing me to treat you a particular way. And that's actually making your burnout worse because I'm difficult to deal with on the job. And so this idea of job burnout will not improve for you individually until we look at it collectively. So it's important that you take care of yourself and do interventions for yourself. If you look on that bottom side, left side, show kindness to yourself, or the interventions that you can do to help your own burnout. But you're also going to have to think about your environment because our burnout is driving each other's burnout. So it's also a workplace culture issue too. So how do we build in kindness to one another so that we're helping each other overcome our burnout and improving our workplace culture? So for Ann Presight's kindness campaign, if she's, let's just say, for instance, she's doing weekly email blast around that campaign. Could you send something like this out? Could you send the burnout video which is a minute and a half, that talks about this idea of impacting our coworkers so that all of our burnout is better and improving our workplace culture. So that's just an example there of how you can use these in electronic delivery through email blast and, oh, wait, let me go back to, there we go. Email blast videos and encouragement electronically like that. Another delivery, you may have ideas about how to use some of this messaging on your social media channels to help send a different message from a recruitment standpoint of, hey, yes, we are a security facility, and yes, you have to be security minded, but we're looking for people who want to be change agents, people who want to impact lives, who want to see this profession become truly a place of transformation for the segment of our population that's been the hardest to see life change in. Or maybe you just have professional presentations and you want some quality resources to embed in that. So those are just some ideas of mine. You guys are more creative than me and can think about how to make this fit in campaigns that maybe you are leading. I won't go through this. This is just some examples of context for each individual of the 6 that we have. If I have some people on this call from Maine, though, during our question and answer time, I would like somebody to give the story. I know that Maine was using one of our videos as a teaching asset, and I found out accidentally because our website went down, and I got a frantic call saying, I'm in a training room with a room full of people and I can't access this video. So I think it was the agent of transformation message that they liked. So if somebody's on this call and knows what I'm talking about, I'm gonna get you to weigh in here in just a second. Again, I told you the heroes is public facing. Burnout is part of our wellness plan, but it can be used individually. You could do your own little short wellness instruction around that. And then I just want to say, we want a healthy workplace culture, and it seems almost out of reach. It seems like an insurmountable task. But if we ever can reach that tipping point, a healthy workplace culture will self-correct. So what we're pushing so hard to create now, when we reach that tipping point, it will start maintaining itself. So yes, we need leaders to drive the culture. We need that top-down push. We do. We need leaders to help create the culture, to cast that vision, and then correct the culture. Because if we're not willing to correct what we're casting a vision for, then it will be easily destroyed at the line level. But eventually, if we're able to drive it down enough, it will begin to self-correct. And what I mean by that, for the day that we have these positive environmental cues so embedded that when a bad actor comes in and says, begins to abuse their role or speak derogatory to their coworkers or inmates or whatever they're doing, that their peers say, hey, we don't do that. That's not who we are. That's not how we act. So you understand, like pushing it down enough that then those environmental cues come into play and people start saying, hey, that's not what we do around here. And it begins to self-correct at that point. We never get to fully take our hands off of it. We don't drift to health by accident, but can we push hard enough till we get this overwhelming environment that begins to self-correct? That's the house we're trying to build nationally. If we can make that happen, think of the impact that will have on our ability to recruit a healthy, qualified, professional workforce. Because what we have now, if we have a negative workplace environment, is that new person who's excited to be in this profession is getting eaten for lunch whenever they hit this negative workplace environment. So how do we push hard enough? And it's not like a switch that all of a sudden it switches and we're done. Our task is over. The work is done. It is a gradual until all of a sudden you kind of look back and realize, oh, wow, things are changing. We really do see the change there. So I certainly do not have all the answers. I'm not even trying to do this alone. I want to hear from you. I want to create tools that are useful to you. So I want to hear from you. I will be doing another webinar on our values of volunteer micro lessons. So it's actually not going to be next month. It's probably going to be in November. So stay tuned for that. But for other micro lessons to be created, for instance, the next two that we'll create will be in that de-escalation realm, because we have a lot of changes coming through ACA with that. I'm on the committee working on the expected practices for de-escalation. So how do we create a language where those common core values are so prevalent in our workforce that people are not defaulting to misuses of force? So that's coming. What ideas do you have? What aha moments do you feel need to be told and pushed in these environmental cues so that we do create a healthy correctional workforce? I want your voice in this project. And that's my email address and my phone number. And stay tuned to what we're creating. Like I said, in all of these 6 micro lessons that we have currently, more assets will be added. We're working on those expert commentary pieces right now. So check back in a week or so, you'll see more of those in there. And then just create more lessons in general. So I'm going to turn it over to Eric for any questions that we have. And thanks for listening to me. Let me stop sharing here. Okay, Eric.
Yeah, so we have a few questions. I'm going to, let's see, I'm going to make it possible for a few of the participants. Rosalie Morin made a comment about Maine. Rosalie, do you want to say a little bit about that? You're currently muted, but I've put you up here. You should be able to talk to the group.
Hi, this is Rosalie. I'm from Maine, and as you mentioned, Maine was doing a lot of training with our staff on what we're calling the Maine model of corrections, and more about the direction we're going, where we've been, how far we've come over the last few years with a lot of our policies. And we were using some of your material that you had kind of mentioned in amongst that day of training, where we were talking, and a lot of it was more discussion driven with staff to talk about culture and dynamic security and normalization. And we used, the transformation and the power words and burnout videos to, in amongst that day of training.
Thanks so much for sharing that, Rosalie.
Next, Art Beeler is with us, and Art, you wanted to make a few comments and ask a question?
Well, hi, folks. How are you?
Hi, Art.
Hi, Eric. How are you both?
Great. Thanks for joining us.
Well, it's always a pleasure to join Fourth Purpose. It is one of the shining lights that I've seen in the last 40 years of my career. Anyway, I wanted to make a comment about not giving up. And the inertia that happens in culture can drive you crazy because people will say, that's the way we've done it. That's the way we're doing it. We're not going to change. And, that's on and on and on and on. I would simply say that those people who want the change, and I have 6 C's, and care is one of those 6 C's, Christy. I'll share the other ones with you sometime. But the 6, we got to have hope and we got to have care. And you just, even though I get tired of it and I get beat up a lot, you can't give up on those 2 factors, because if you give up on hope, the inmates who are out there who are serving long terms, they have nothing to do except to do things nefariously. And if you give up on care, you're giving up on the basic human premise that you you have. So I appreciate all that. I think and I don't remember the question I asked, Eric, but I think the whole issue is that you've just got to keep working at it. And, you know, I was telling Eric, I have a picture of Don Quixote in my office. It's a picture that I've had since I was a rookie caseworker in 1976. And guess what? It's still in my office because I think you just have to keep working on the windmills. And so appreciate what you guys are doing. And you gave me I think I have your permission. I'm going to speak to college classes next month in East Carolina. And one of the things I always try to do is recruit. One of the things they kind of look at me like, are you kidding? I wouldn't work in corrections. But I'm going to use your video on the purpose of prisons and see if I can get some discussion off of that, if that's okay. Thank you, guys.
Absolutely.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Art.
Thanks, Art. There was also a question about, we did record this webinar and we'll make every effort to make it available so that you all can use it in helpful ways in your departments. But that's it. I want to just share one more thing. We are having another webinar, a values-based wellness training webinar on October 20th at 1 p.m. Eastern time. So you'll be hearing about that, and we look forward to seeing you again on these webinars. So thanks again, everyone. Really appreciate your participation.
Thanks for your time.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.